as head of the Night Elements Coterie.
After your chief rival was removed, through no fault of your own.
Not saying anything.
As far as we know.
Can you tell us what the Night Elements Coterie is all about?
We have a current motivation.
Well, the original founding factor of the Coterie was revenge.
Was that our two, that Elizabeth and Bryce were killed, and we want to know why and who, and preferably the who behind the who, because we found out the who pulled the trigger, but we want to know who told the guy to pull the trigger.
The ultimate point of the Night Elements Coterie is, well, initially they were formed by two particular individuals, the Coterie head, Elizabeth O'Neill, and the Nosferatu Coterie ambassador, whose name was Bryce. And Bryce and Elizabeth were both killed. Certainly, as far as the Coterie is aware, and very much as the Coterie believes, by the Second Inquisition. Pretty much since then, the Coterie believes certainly that they, as a Coterie, have been targeted. Their purpose is to protect each other, to avenge their lost members, particularly their lost leaders, and to end the threat of the Second Inquisition in Glasgow. So the Coterie and much the rest of Glasgow's vampire community were gathered together in Night Elements, which obviously belongs to Rose, who is a member of our Coterie. While the evening was in full swing, Happy had not been having a particularly good night, as he is somewhat wont to not have, and he had a vision. Rose was in the middle of performing one of her immortal burlesque routines, so a couple of us took Happy outside to where he could catch his breath and get himself together a little, without being aware that the vision he was actually having was of Bryce's death. So as he recovered from that, he tried to get himself to his feet to warn Bryce, but the noise involved in all of this actually drew Bryce outside. It was one of those horrifying long moments when you know that something horrendous is going to happen, but you simply cannot move fast enough to change it. He had burst outside and was remonstrating with Happy for interrupting Rose's performance. Many of us were aware through various reasons that the place was surrounded, that we were being watched by people we couldn't entirely see, or whose identities we weren't entirely aware of. And that was the point where Bryce was hit with a sniper round from a Second Inquisition gunman's sniper rifle. It was a specifically anti-vampire round. It burnt him up from the inside out. Literally a couple of feet away from us, right in front of us, and we couldn't do anything. And then he was ash and dispersing on the wind.
There was an evening of chaos in the Night Elements Club, at which point Elizabeth O'Neill ran away to her haven. Given everything that was going on, and given that we were half expecting our entire world to collapse in on us at that point, running to your haven made perfect sense. I think a couple of days go by, we don't hear from her, which is unexpected, and eventually we are sent a link to a video online. This video, taken by someone we have no idea, but we don't know who submitted it, we don't know who uploaded it, but it shows a squad of maybe 4 or 5 people breaking into Elizabeth O'Neill's haven, dragging her out forcibly into the sunlight and watching her burn to death. It is a brutal and horrible death for any vampire. It's pretty much the worst that could happen. And some people enjoyed this so much that they filmed it and sent it to everyone she ever cared about. So understandably, we are somewhat annoyed.
When the shot went off, I took a couple of fragments from the gun in the eye, but being a vampire of some age, I regenerated the damage fairly quickly, but it did give us a little more information on what actually happened.
We're a little bit of a misfit bunch. We don't necessarily fit into the anarchs, but we have more anarch leanings, but there's also a certain tie to the Camarilla that Rose has from her sire. So it's sort of the Night Elements itself kind of has that kind of safe space aspect of things.
Well, as far as I understand it, the Coterie is very much some kind of like almost neutral type party. Neutral's kind of debatable since they tend to side a little bit more with the anarchs, I think. They seem to be more sympathetic, more in line with their goals, I guess, since they are the ones that are in power, I think, of the city. I'm pretty sure.
But generally we're just trying to keep our heads above water because there's a lot of stuff happening. We're not really sure how any of it ties together, but we'd just quite like to know who killed our friends, please.
Elizabeth.
The head of our coterie for
I think,
now.
I think you've all got ties to her.
Malcolm's mentor, teacher, occasional lover, and undisputed master.
Hard person to read, but I would have called her trustworthy and certainly always respected her.
And the person that Rose is current at the beginning, before she is introduced to Sunshine, Rose and her quite frequently butt heads about who should be in charge of this coterie, and have very fun snark fests.
Elizabeth was a complicated and confusing character that I don't think anyone who ever met her properly had a handle on. She very, very definitely did not deserve to die the way that she did. But it does say something about Elizabeth that there's a conspiracy theory going around that she's not in fact dead. That is a sort of air of mystery that Elizabeth O'Neill attracts to herself. She was the head of the coterie and ruled it with an iron fist of mystery. None of us really knew exactly what her end game was, but she treated us very well, even though I think maybe only Malcolm, and even then maybe only Malcolm would ever pretend to know what was going on in her mind.
Yeah, she was she knew how to be a liege lord, like the way I understood the term, and that was basically the relationship that I would usually was willing to maintain with her, which she wouldn't have done if she hadn't trusted her at least to a fairly solid level. She was clearly very powerful. She very clearly had a lot going on that she would have preferred the rest of us not to know.
I think it's fair to say that she's some degree of a mentor to most of us, possibly all of us, and she's certainly somebody who commands a lot of respect. When she talks, we listen and we trust her judgment.
She is the Tremere Primogen, so she is in charge of all the blood sorcerers in Glasgow, which counts for quite a lot in terms of political clout.
A mover and a shaker.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a player.
Bryce.
Oh, be nice to Bryce.
I like Bryce. He was just, I wasn't expecting it.
Poor old Bryce. We knew him.
He was the loveliest.
The social and pleasant member of the coterie,
Excuse you.
Probably the highest socially adept Nosferatu that we've ever known.
Absolutely. And definitely one of the more regardless of how he looked, he was the most human. He had the most amount of humanity.
Yeah.
Did have absolutely fucking terrible luck though, having been found pretty much butchered with limbs taken off at one point by Shalva and Lily, and then later stopping a bullet with his face.
Yeah.
My first introduction for Bryce was literally him hanging like a fucking piece of meat. He's goddamn ready to become a kebab. He was ready for Dyson. And Shalva was like, oh hey ho, off we go onto his shoulder and down a fucking sewer. That's what I know about Bryce.
Bryce was a very charming person who almost certainly knew about 5 times more than he ever gave away. He was probably kind of the heart of the Coterie, to be honest. He was, I think he was someone that everyone was pretty close to. And he let Happy drive.
Yeah, which is definitely a major minus in his character because,
Judgment, not character.
Fair enough.
Plus points in character, serious minuses in judgment.
That sounds entirely fair. Yes.
So the way that Oud was introduced to Bryce was that he showed up outside her. At that point, she didn't have much contact with the vampire community in general. One evening, he showed up in a car driven by a complete madman wearing only leather trousers.
That would be happy.
And said to her it was that he thought it was time that she rejoined society.
Very, very few people are going to have a bad word to say about Bryce. It's an absolute tragedy that he died. He does appear to have been targeted by the Inquisition, led outside under probably false pretenses and shot in such a horrible way that there was absolutely no way anyone could save him. An absolutely horrendous death, and he did not deserve it one little bit.
He got angry though, like when he was, because at his death, you guys, a bunch of people were outside.
Mm-hmm.
Rose was inside performing. Bryce had gone out to tell everybody off and to get back inside because Rose was dancing, and he got a bullet in the brain.
Do you think
moral of the story? Don't do what Rose tells you.
Yeah,
I didn't do anything. She was in the middle of performing.
That picture's a little disconcerting. I feel the eyes are following me. I'm not moving.
Okay, we'll move on.
It's saying, "Why didn't you save me, Malcolm? Why didn't you save me?"
Why did you do it?